As part of the establishment's celebration of the crashing and burning of Donald Trump last week, which, by the way, didn't happen. If you look at my video yesterday, Trump actually moved up 2 points. Has been a legal argument that Trump really violated campaign finance law and committed something that could be tantamount to high crimes and misdemeanors, the basis for impeachment in our Constitution. Well, Andrew McCarthy, a former U.S. attorney or assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District and a columnist for the National Review, spelled out the argument against this, and it's worth paying attention to him. He begins by quoting Chairman Bradley Smith, the former head of the Federal Elections Commission, the body charged with implementing campaign finance law. And he says that, quote, despite his guilty plea, Cohen did not violate the campaign finance laws. The idea is that paying hush money is not an in-kind contribution, even though the concealment of embarrassing conduct may have been intended, at least in part, to influence an election. Smith explains that paying for silence is more in the nature of a personal use expenditure, which he defines as an obligation or expense that would exist even if the person for whom it was paid were not a candidate in a political election. And McCarthy goes on to explain that Trump may well have been thinking about the impact on his election chances that the disclosure of the affairs would have. But Trump had major concerns that had nothing to do with the election: personal embarrassment, humiliation of his family, the blow to his marriage. And then McCarthy goes on to discuss a case, the case of John Edwards, where Edwards was accused of something very similar to what Trump is accused of doing. He took money from a donor, Bunny Mellon, and used that to pay for silence for Rael Hunter, his mistress and the mother of his out-of-wedlock child. And the feds brought charges against him for violating campaign finance laws. And his attorney argued back, Abby Lowell, argued back that this was not a campaign expenditure. He was doing this to save his marriage, to prevent harm and pain to his wife, to not besmirch his public image, and had nothing to do, only partially something to do, with the narrow construct of influencing the vote in the election of 2008. And based on this, McCarthy concludes, Donald Trump will not face criminal campaign finance charges. The president will not be charged because prosecutors cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had the required intent to violate the law. And then McCarthy goes on to explain. Federal elections law requires a candidate to knowingly and willfully commit a violation. Willfulness is the law's most burdensome mens rea standard for prosecutors. They have to prove that A, he understood that his conduct was illegal, and B, that he acted with the purpose of disobeying the law. And McCarthy, a former prosecutor, concludes, I do not see how the government could meet this demanding burden of proof. Part of the reason for that is that nobody really knows what the election law is about this kind of stuff. The line between personal use and campaign expenditures has never been precisely defined. And what the candidate is allowed to do as opposed to a member of his staff has also been fudged and not clearly delineated. And in view of that, in view of the vagueness of this, McCarthy says the prosecution cannot meet this burden of proof. So let's get past all of this, folks, okay? He's not going to jail, he's not going to be impeached, and his poll numbers are fine. Okay? Thanks.